Hey guys, in this month's Historical Fiction 101, I'm going to be sharing some book recommendations for The War of the Roses. So I am a huge fan of the historical event that was the War of the Roses. I've kind of gotten into that these last several years, thanks mostly to Philippa Gregory, if you will. So yeah, a quick little synopsis, if you will, of what the hell the War of the Roses was even about, in case you're not familiar with it, and perhaps this video makes you interested in the War of the Roses. So yeah, I got all of this information from Wikipedia, if you will. I know Wikipedia is not the most reliant of sources, but still, for just a quick summary, essentially, I just went to Wikipedia just to get it out of the way. So yeah, this is what Wikipedia says is the War of the Roses. The War of the Roses, they were a series of English civil wars for control of the throne of England between two branches of the royal house of Plantagenet, House Lancaster, which was represented by the red rose being like on their house sigil and whatnot, and then House York, which was represented with the sigil of the white rose. Because then, yeah, you get the Tudors later, and it's that merging of the red and the white rose, if you will. So yeah, these wars happened between 1455 to 1487, and these wars began for a variety of different reasons. Some of them being social and financial troubles following the 100-Year War, the mental infirmity, and the weak rule of King Henry VI. So yeah, just a series of things that kind of escalated these events into happening to begin with. And yeah, some of the most notable figures of this time, these particular kings of England at the time, it does start with King Henry VI. King Henry VI was just, for starters, King Henry VI, he was the son of King Henry V. And King Henry V was just one of the most pivotal kings, I think, in English history, the things that he kind of achieved during his very short reign. And the thing is, Henry V, he died like in his early 30s. So he left behind a baby, literally. He left behind a baby to rule, essentially. So yeah, King Henry VI, he ruled since he was a child, pretty much. You know, he had like other people ruling for him in his stead until he grew into maturity, obviously. But yeah, King Henry VI was he's kind of famous for that he was very weak and infirm, possibly a little crazy, you know, so that's kind of what added into this whole thing with these different branches of House Plantagenet kind of being like, hold up, we don't need this weak guy as our king. So yeah, following King Henry VI, we have Edward IV, who essentially usurps the throne, and there is this little back and forth where Edward and Henry kind of rule, and then we have Edward V, who comes after Henry IV. And yeah, during this time we get the whole famous Princes in the Tower incident. Did the boys, were they murdered? Did they run away? Where'd they go? We don't have no proof what happened to the princes in the tower. And yeah, everything with Richard III. Yeah, Richard III was he involved? Did he have anything to gain by that? Yeah, Richard III, seriously, is one of my favorite English monarchs. He's often terribly vilified, and I like the historical fiction that kind of humanizes him, you know, because William Shakespeare, it's William Shakespeare's fault that Richard III has been vilified, I think. So yeah, after Richard III, that's how we lead up to the Tudors taking the throne, essentially. Henry VII, he's able to kill Richard III, take the throne of England. And yeah, it's his marriage to Princess Elizabeth of York that's able to kind of tie in all these various different branches of House Plantagenet together. And yeah, we get the Tudors leading into the Golden Age, pretty much, you know, with Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth I. And yeah, I have a little side note here. The War of the Roses. All of this craziness and turmoil, it may sound a little familiar, and that's because George R.R. Martin, famous for his A Song of Ice and Fire series, he was inspired by the War of the Roses to create that series. So yeah, you can probably see all those parallels in there. So yeah, that's a little back information about the War of the Roses, because it can be very complex and confusing, and yeah, that's not even the half of it, you guys. What I just gave you ain't even the half of it. There's so much more to it. It's very fascinating. I recommend reading some nonfiction, because even the nonfiction is really great. But yeah, this is historical fiction. So I found some books here about the War of the Roses, the historical fiction War of the Roses, if you will. So yeah, let's get going. I'm going to read off of my computer here to make this video go a little quicker. First up, we have Stormbird by Con Iggulden. I think I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly. But yeah, he has a series of books. I think his series is like 4 books, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the first book is Stormbird. And then the second book is Trinity. The third book is Bloodline. And the fourth book is Ravenspur. And yeah, each of these books, it's about the War of the Roses. You know, some sort of event during that time period. It sounds like the first book, it sounds like Stormbird in particular, that starts off with Richard Plantagenet, the Duke of York, how he essentially gets his son on the throne of England after King Henry VI. And then, yeah, each of these books keeps going through the war, it looks like, and yeah, ending eventually with the reign and the death of Richard III. The next recommendation here is Daughter of York by Anne Easter Smith. And this sounds like it's about the hold on, let me read it. I'm sitting here reading too far ahead. This takes place in 1461. Edward, son of Richard of York, ascends to the throne, and his willful sister Margaret immediately becomes a pawn in European politics as Edward negotiates her marriage. The young Margaret falls deeply in love with Anthony Woodville, the married brother of Edward's Queen Elizabeth. But Edward has arranged for his sister to wed Charles, son of the Duke of Burgundy, and soon Margaret is setting sail for her new life. Her official escort Anthony Woodville. Oh man, there's a love triangle here, you guys. But yeah, she don't love the guy she's going to go marry. She loves this other guy. So yeah, this sounds like it's about Edward IV's sister, which I'm very interested in that. You know, a lot of stuff doesn't really focus on her, unfortunately. So that sounds really, really good. We got another book here by Anne Easter Smith, and this is Queen by Right. And this is about Cecily of York. And this book reveals how she came to step into her destiny, beginning with her marriage to Richard, Duke of York, whom she meets when she is 9 and he is 13. Raised together in her father's household, they become a true love match, and together face personal tragedies, pivotal events of history, and deadly political intrigue. All of England knows that Richard has a clear claim to the throne, and when King Henry VI becomes unfit to rule, Cecily must put aside her hopes and fears and help her husband decide what is right for their family and their country. Yes, another book about kind of a forgotten lady of history, if you will, because a lot of historical fiction likes to focus on the male figures, so this sounds really cool. Yeah, focusing on the mother of Edward IV, it sounds like. Next up, I decided to include William Shakespeare's Richard III because this is still technically historical fiction. You know, even though he wrote this sometime in the 1500s, he was still removed a good 50 plus years from the events of the War of the Roses, if you will. So yeah, this is one of Shakespeare's very popular history plays, if you will, focusing on Richard III. And one of the big things with Shakespeare's version of Richard III, really showcasing Richard III as ambitious and power-hungry, manipulative, suggesting he did murder his own nephews, the whole princes in the tower thing, you know? So yeah, it's like I mentioned earlier, it's because of this play, it's because of Shakespeare that Richard III has often been vilified, and he is often one of the great classic Shakespearean villains. And yeah, I've not read the play, but I have seen the play done through the Hollow Crown series where Benedict Cumberbatch played him in this version. And oh my god, Benedict Cumberbatch was freaking amazing. Yeah, guys, he was amazing. Super terrifying. Next up, I have one of my favorites by Philippa Gregory. Y'all know I love Philippa Gregory. We have The White Queen. And this is the Cousins War. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around. This is the Cousins War series. And the first book in this series is The White Queen, focusing on Elizabeth Woodville, who is the White Queen, representing the White Rose, and she marries Edward IV. And then we have The Red Queen, the second book in this series, and this follows Margaret Beaufort, who she has married into the Tudor family. She wants to get her son Henry Tudor on the throne. Yeah, Henry Tudor eventually becoming the future Henry VII, who usurps the throne from Richard III. And then the third book in this series, The Kingmakers Daughter, and this follows Anne Neville, who is the daughter of the Kingmaker, as the title suggests, her father being Richard Neville, who was the guy who essentially put Edward IV on the throne, usurping that from Henry VI and whatnot. And yeah, this follows Anne Neville, who eventually marries Richard III. And I love this book. This is my favorite book, you guys. Out of the entire Cousins War series by Philippa Gregory, I think The Kingmaker's Daughter is easily my favorite. I love them all, but this is easily my favorite. And yeah, those are kind of the big three from this particular series. Because some of the other books in the series start merging into her Tudors series. You know, that being like the other Boleyn girl and the Constant Princess and the Boleyn Inheritance and whatnot. Yeah, there's some other books that kind of start interweaving throughout those. Because you have things like The White Princess and is it The King's Curse? I think it's called The King's Curse. You know, those books are part of this series technically, but they kind of start merging into the Tudor series as well. Next up, The Queen of Last Hopes, and this is about Margaret of Anjou, who was married to the sickly, weak-minded Henry VI. And yeah, Margaret of Anjou, she becomes Queen of England. I believe she's originally French, if I'm not mistaken. Is she originally French, I want to say? I might have that wrong. So yeah, the quick summary of this one: Margaret of Anjou, Queen of England, cannot give up on her husband even when he slips into insanity, and as mother to the House of Lancaster's last hope, she cannot give up on her son even when England turns against them. This gripping tale of a queen forced to stand strong in the face of overwhelming odds is at its heart a tender tale of love. Next up, The Sun and Splendor by Sharon K. Penman, and this is a very popular book, I believe, that I have yet to read. I'm kind of shocked I have not read this yet. And yeah, this is her take on the War of the Roses and Richard III, pretty much. And her intent, as the Goodreads synopsis says here, her intent is to essentially redeem Richard III. He's often vilified as the bitter, twisted, scheming hunchback who murdered his nephews, the princes in the Tower, from his maligned place in history with a dazzling combination of research and storytelling. So yeah, born into the treacherous courts of 15th century England in the midst of what history has called the War of the Roses, Richard was raised in the shadow of his charismatic brother, King Edward IV. Loyal to his friends and passionately in love with the one woman who has denied him, Richard emerges as a gifted man far more sinned against than sinning. Oh yes, I definitely gotta pick this up, especially since I love Richard III, you guys. Next up, The Tudor Rose by Margaret Campbell Barnes. This is, let's see, the plot summary on this one. Two princes battle to determine England's destiny. Whoever wins will take Britain's most rightful heir as his bride and her kingdom for his own. On one side is her uncle Richard, Richard III, the last Plantagenet king, whom she fears to be the murderer of her two brothers, the would-be kings. On the other is Henry Tudor, the exiled knight. Can he save her from a horrifying marriage to a cutthroat soldier? And yeah, you know, this book kind of just jumped into things. It didn't even say that this is about Princess Elizabeth of York, the daughter of Elizabeth Woodville and Edward IV. And I love Princess Elizabeth of York. Just such a great, interesting character in history. So that's it for my recommendations for The War of the Roses, you guys. In the comments below, what books have I left out? Because I think there's a lot. There's a lot when it comes to this war. There's so much out there, and I would love to consume as much of it as I can. So that is it for this video, you guys. In the comments below, have you guys read any of these books? Do you want to read any of them? Just let me know your thoughts down below. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.